Hello guys, Dr. B here. So this is a brief lecture on ionic and polyatomic compounds, how to derive them, and how to name them as well. So one of the things you need to be mindful of when we're doing this is knowing metals and nonmetals. Like we said before, metals on the left side of the periodic table, they tend to lose electrons. Nonmetals gain them. Except for hydrogen, of course there has to be an exception. If they're on the left of this imaginary staircase with aluminum, that's your Q, or your clue, I guess, and transition metals here, everything towards the left is a metal except for hydrogen, and everything right of the staircase will be considered a nonmetal. So, metal versus nonmetal. So, potassium's a metal, beryllium's a metal, beryllium's a metal, bromine's a nonmetal, nonmetal, fluorine is a nonmetal, silver is Ag, and that is a metal, just by knowing that silver is a metal, and nitrogen's a nonmetal. How to create Lewis dot diagrams. That's important because this is going to play into how ionic bonds are formed as well as covalent bonds when we talk about that later on. So you have to remember your Lewis dot diagrams that comes from the periodic table, and also it's based on the number of valence electrons. So lithium only has 1 valence electron, carbon has 4, oxygen has 6. So remember, they're trying to get to a full octet, so it needs 2 more electrons, which we will see in the Lewis dot structure. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this means that there are 2 open spaces here for a bond to form when they either steal or when they share electrons with another element. So beryllium has 2 dots, sodium is 1, helium is 2, carbon is 4, and boron, capital B, it's only 3 valence electrons. Remember that this comes from the periodic table and looking at those valence electrons. Ions, how they're formed, you have to change the number of electrons. You either lose or you gain. When you lose electrons, you lose something negative. So let's say that you lose, like I lose 2 students who annoy me in class. I am more positive because I lost those students. No offense to somebody who's listening, maybe, potentially. So let's say I lose 2 students who annoy me, so I lose 2 negative things. I'm 2 more positive because I lost those 2 negative things, so my charge is 2 plus. So which ones do which? So metals, they will lose electrons to form cations, while nonmetals will gain electrons to make negative ions, or anions. So cations cough up electrons, they lose them, so they're metals. Anions accept electrons, so they gain them. They form a negative ion. Another way I remember it is that cats have paws, so they're positive, and anions, like onions, make you cry, but that's not necessarily a negative thing, but some people still think that. So what is the charge of an atom with 16 protons and 18 electrons? So your protons minus electrons will give you your charge. So I have 16 protons minus 8 electrons. So if you'll notice, I have 2 more electrons. That means I have a 2 minus charge. Oops, I don't want to do like that. There you go. If oxygen gains 2 electrons, so it means 2 more negative things in its life, it is 2 negative. Beryllium will lose electrons, so that means it loses 2 negative things, so it's going to be 2 positive. So oxygen gains 2 electrons, so it's 2 minus. Beryllium loses 2 electrons, so it's 2 plus. So ion notation. So notice you need a symbol and also the charge. How many electrons does an chloride ion, that's how you would call this, chloride, have? 1 minus, so that means you gain 1 more electron. On the periodic table, chlorine has an atomic number of 17. So if it was neutral, it would have 17 electrons as well. So 1 minus would be another additional electron, so 18 electrons. How many electrons does nitrogen 3 minus have? Nitrogen has an atomic number of 7. So for it to have a 3 minus charge, that means that it has to gain 3 electrons. So if you'll think about it that way, if an atomic number of 7 and it has 7 protons and electrons, sorry, it's ugly, 7 electrons. So for it to have a 3 minus charge, it needs to have a total of 10 electrons. Aluminum has an atomic number of 13. So how many electrons does aluminum with a 3 plus on it? So if it has a 3 plus, it is going to lose 3 electrons, and that means it's going to have a total of 10. You have an anion notation for an atom with 20 protons. So that 20 protons and 18 electrons. So the element with 20 protons is going to be a calcium atom. But if it has 18 electrons, that means it loses 2 from a neutral calcium atom. So now it has a 2 plus charge because I lost 2 electrons. Give the ion notation for an atom with 6 protons and 2 electrons. The atom with 6 protons is carbon, and since carbon has only 2 electrons left, that means it had to have lost 4 electrons. So if I lose 4 electrons, my charge will be 4 plus. Give the ion notation for an atom with 15 protons and 18 electrons. So 15 protons, that's an atomic number of 15, that is phosphorus. If phosphorus has 18 electrons in this particular ion, that means it had to have gained 3 electrons to form this. So it would be 3 minus.